Jake, where are you?
Hi, can you hear me? I'm right here. Can you hear me? Hello?
I'm not
Yes, you can hear.
hearing
Can you hear me
anyone.
now? Let's see. Can you hear me? Hello?
Paulo, estou escutando.
Hi,
Yes,
Tá
I think.
falando, sim, sim.
Paula, a gente está escutando. Você não está conseguindo escutar?
oh,
Travou, não,
Thank you.
você que travou.
I'm hearing. Oh,
Wonderful.
it's a miracle. Now I can hear.
Perfect. Um,
Hi, Jake.
Hi, Paula. How are you?
I'm okay. Welcome
Good,
to
good. Hi,
Brazil.
everybody. Yeah, it's nice to see everybody's smiling faces. Um, Thank you for inviting me to be on tonight, Paula. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Jake Greenspan. I am the founder of the Floortime Center. I'm also the son of the late Dr. Stanley Greenspan, and I have taken over the training program for the Greenspan Floortime approach through Stanley I. Greenspan MD Inc., which was my father's company. Um, I want to just kind of share a little information with people up front, just about my father's work and kind of what's been happening over the last 15 years since he passed away. Um, I started working with my father back in, well, actually when I was in high school. I started doing research projects with him over the summer and working with some of his colleagues for internships, and it was a wonderful experience. But most importantly, I was learning from him about what floor time was and what DIR was. And those were his kind of babies. You know, he created them back in the 70s and the 80s to be really tools for all parents and all caregivers and all therapists to use, not just for children with autism, but all individuals. And he really identified, was the first professional and first doctor to identify these fundamental stages of social emotional development that he believed were driven by emotional interactions with our meaningful relationships. And so that was kind of the foundation of where his work started. And then it evolved over years and turned into floor time. But it actually started out just as DIR. So I just want to share one thing with you. He did not approve of the term DIR floor time because it combines two separate things. So he went interpersonally, even though when he was running ICDL, he founded ICDL, he used that term because that was the term his colleagues liked, and he didn't like to have conflict and to manage people, so he just agreed to let them use it. But the truth was, floor time is an intervention. DIR model is used for evaluations and assessments. Just like if you're a doctor, you do an assessment to determine a child's diagnosis, and then they send you to a therapist for intervention. And the therapist might do an evaluation to see where the child is developmentally and what the goals are. And then you provide an intervention, which is a therapy. So that's what DIR and floor time are and how they're related, but they're actually two separate things. And many interventions can fit into the DIR model. Floor time is not the only one. So it's very important that people understand, one, that difference. Two, the other really important difference is that after my father passed away in 2010, he refused to put Serena Weider, the founder of Perfectum, in charge of ICDL's training program. He did not trust her. And this is documented. I'm not making this up. I'm not being slanderous. This is documented. He refused to let her take over. And so she threatened him and she spun off and created Perfectum. ICDL then had two separate CEOs over the next few years. One of them is a Chilean doctor named Cecilia Breinbauer, and then who's also created her own version of floor time called Floor Time 2.0. I think you're getting the hint here that people really want to be in charge of his work, but don't all understand his work the same way. And then after she left ICDL, a cognitive behavioral therapist named Jeff Gunzel took over, and since then he's expanded ICDL and DR floor time tremendously, and he's done a good job of that. I'll give him full credit for advocating and expanding the approach. However, in doing that, he's made significant changes to the curriculum that my father called floor time. So what my father believed were the core principles that made floor time effective have now almost all been changed, including the definition of what it means to follow a child's lead, including what it means to challenge a child up the developmental ladder, and especially what it means to encourage thinking. They don't even use the word thinking in their curriculum, they use the word cognition. Now, yes, cognition is important, but that's not the only type of thinking we do, right? So there's many different pieces to this that have now been changing. And what happens is we can all argue about the importance of the terminology, milestone versus capacity, right? But the truth is, when it comes to applying these things, they matter. Because if I'm thinking about a capacity, well, I'm thinking about a set of skills. But if I'm thinking about a milestone, I'm thinking about a set of skills that happens at a certain time before something and after something. So all of a sudden, my milestone is a progressive, stepwise process. But with capacities, we don't think about that concept because that's not embedded. So in my books, in my father's books, he used both terms somewhat interchangeably, but they each had different meanings. That's why he used both. Now, when we look at these other groups who are training people in floor time, they've made it simpler to help people understand it by getting rid of the multiple terms, but they're actually limiting people's understanding because they're not getting the full story. So this is something I don't want to kind of have a conflict about people's perceptions of my father's work. I just want to share with you the history of it all and why it's important to understand its most fundamental elements from him, essentially, right? This is not something I created. The name, the Greenspan floor time approach, was created after he died. And I'll tell you why. Because we already saw the changes happening to the curriculum that were being used under the name DIR floor time. And since ICDL had been using that name, my mom, who was a widow at the time, who's a widow, but was very mourning the loss of her husband of almost 50 years, she didn't want to fight with them over the use of that term. So she decided we would use another term to differentiate ourselves in the type of floor time we were doing. Unfortunately, now there's actually misinformation on their website that makes you think that I created Greenspan floor time, which couldn't be further from the truth, because actually she was the one who got the name Greenspan floor time, not me. So there's a lot of really, again, I don't want to point fingers at people, but this is not professional. I just wanted to say that. That's not how professionals who care about the children and the families should operate. When I took over some of the responsibilities for my father, there was one thing he instilled in myself and Tim Bleeker, the director of the Floortime Center, who's my partner in the Floortime Center. He said one thing that you need to make sure of, you always keep in mind when you make decisions about the practice at the Floortime Center or training people in Greenspan Floor Time, is always make decisions on what's best for the child first. And if you stick with that, you'll never go wrong. And that's to the day how I make decisions. And Paula will tell you, I'm a difficult person at times because I'm so passionate. Because I'm so passionate about doing what's right for the child. But I'll tell you, what's right for the child may not always be what's right for the business. And actually, at the Floortime Center, we've had periods where we're known internationally with families who come from all over the world. But financially, we are not making a ton of money because we have 10 therapy rooms, but we only have 6 or 7 kids there at a time. Why? Because we want to make sure they each have their own spaces. We want to make sure we're not fighting for spaces that are going to be best for one child versus another child. So when we make decisions in the training that I'm going to be bringing in January to Brazil, as well as when we're providing treatment locally at the Floortime Center, we always make decisions as to what's best for the child, not what's best for the business. And unfortunately, sometimes not even what's best for the parents. We sometimes have to tell them something they don't want to hear, but that's also not always good for business. So I just want to share, this is who we are. This is how we operate. And we want as many of you to come join us in January as possible, because what Paula has told me is that the community in Brazil is hungry for effective interventions for children with developmental challenges. And all I can tell you is that the version that my father practiced and the version that I will teach you is the only version out there that's getting the results that he got. The other versions of floor time that are being used are not producing any data to show effectiveness because they're not getting the results that he got when he was practicing. we have produced data and we have shown those results. So so if people really want not just the original, but the official version of Floortime, it's the Greenspan Floortime approach, because this is directly what my father was using when he helped so many children become what he called superstars. I did want to answer a few questions if you had any. I don't want it to become a long Q&A just because I have some other things I have to do tonight, and I'm sure you all do too. But I know Paula can answer the questions just as well as I can. So please, if you have any questions, and Paula, if you can translate them, I'd appreciate that.
Ok. Gente, ele está abrindo para perguntas. Se vocês têm alguma pergunta, e eu vou fazer o possível para traduzir vocês. Para ele para vocês é mais fácil, né? Alguém gostaria de fazer alguma pergunta? Just a minute, Jake. Ele falou muitas coisas, né? Ele contou sobre a história do pai, ele falou sobre a questão da nomenclatura, ele explicou que DIR e Floortime, o próprio Dr. Greenspan já não usava mais esse termo separado, porque o DIR é a parte da avaliação, o Floortime é a parte da intervenção, então não se fala mais assim. Ele falou muitas coisas, gente. Eu sei que a legenda não funcionou, mas fiquem tranquilos que deu tempo, pelo menos, eu começar a gravar, então depois eu vou botar a legenda para a gente não perder, porque foi muita coisa rica. Mas não sou eu que tenho que falar, são vocês. O que vocês gostariam de perguntar para o homem, gente? Ele está aqui. Sem vergonha, sem timidez. I'm talking to them that without shameless, because Brazilian people are not this way.
So Paula, there was a question that was asked in English. I'm going to just start with that one, if that's okay.
Okay.
The question was, how do you see the Floortime market for Brazil in the future? The truth is, I don't want to be managing the market in Brazil. I want you all to market the market in Brazil, manage the market in Brazil, right? So I don't have a vision for it. I want it to be used, period. I want it to be used well. I want it to help children. And hopefully we can see the differences and then we can collect some data down the road. But my goal is to teach you and put it into your hands. I'm not trying to create a big business in Brazil where I'm going to be making a lot of money, because it's not what Floortime is about, nor do therapists and parents have a lot of money. So, and if you have a lot of money, I'm sorry, then I'm not talking about you. But I used to be a teacher. Okay, I started out my career as a classroom teacher, right? And I've been to 20 countries lecturing and teaching people all throughout Europe and South America. And what I realized when I was younger, yes, I wanted there to be a big market. I wanted to make a lot of money doing this. I thought I could. But then I soon realized the money isn't there. So why am I trying to do this? Really, what is my goal? My goal is to help the families and the children. If that turns into something bigger, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And so my goal is to put this into your hands, educate you all. Certainly there will be expectations and requirements that you have to follow in order to say you're using this. And you have to be very good at this in order to continue to say you're using it. So that's where my focus is on the quality of what you're doing, is not how much money you're paying me. And what I've done is, as far as the training goes, I've created a training program that is in large part free. And Paula will tell you, we're creating opportunities for people to learn for free. But if you want a certificate, you have to take a test that you pay for. But the test is still cheaper than all the other training programs out there. So that is how we're structuring it. Our goal is to get you the information, parents the information, and help you learn how to do this at as low, if not at no cost as possible. But then if you do want a certificate, if you want a credential, you'll have to take a test and you'll have to show that you're doing it. It's not just about paying attention to a lecture and saying you were there for 10 hours. It's about actually understanding this and passing the test, which will be written, as well as submitting videos showing mastery. That's how we train. And the video submission part costs money because we have to have people review it and I have to pay them. So that's where the money is. But it's still going to be much, much cheaper than any other training. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Wait a minute.
Pode perguntar, Paulo.
Just a little bit. Vamos lá. Vocês perguntaram para ele como ele via o mercado do Floortime no Brasil, né? Como que ele vê essa chegada da Greenspan Floortime no Brasil, e ele já respondeu da forma com que me fez me apaixonar de novo pelo Floortime, agora dentro da roupagem Greenspan Floortime. Ele não está nem aí para a questão de mercado em relação a chegar e vender um produto. Na verdade, ele está preocupado em treinar pessoas para que as pessoas tenham acesso, de fato, ao que o pai dele criou, para que vocês possam se empoderar do conhecimento. Ele também falou um pouco, respondeu um pouco aqui a pergunta que fizeram sobre a formação, e aí ele disse que é a filosofia dele, né? Transmitir esse conhecimento da maneira mais acessível possível, financeiramente falando, e que, basicamente, a formação vocês custeiam pelas avaliações. Então, é o meu tempo, é o tempo do Jake na análise dos vídeos, nessa preparação, e o meu, principalmente, né, por conta do idioma, preparando vocês para essa prática profissional, né? É justamente essa a visão. O objetivo da Greenspan Floortime não é chegar no Brasil e dominar o mercado no sentido financeiro da coisa. Na verdade, o objetivo é chegar no Brasil e capacitar o máximo de pessoas possível, e para isso o objetivo é fazer acessível, tá? Financeiramente. Acho que eu resumi bem. You can answer now.
Okay. So there's two questions in English I'll answer. And just so you all know, in about 4 minutes, I'm going to have to leave. And I apologize if there are more questions. But the good thing is I'll be there in person in January. You can ask me all the questions you want if you come to the lecture. So the first question is, how can we integrate our work as therapists with schools, and how can Floortime help with this? So I started a school years ago in Washington, D.C. I founded a charter school. It's a publicly funded school that was privately run. And it was started by one of the parents I used to work with who got a PhD in education. Her son has autism. He's now in college. He's now living on campus, going to classes by himself. When he was 2.5 years old, he was speaking in echolalic and repetitive scripted phrases and would have to sit and flip through books 10 times over, finish activities, etc. He had a lot of the classic stuff. He has made tremendous progress. And I know that doesn't answer your question. But what I will tell you is, because we created a school around my father's work for all students, it was not special needs school. It was not an autism school. It was a school for all types of learners, but the academic and the social emotional curriculum were based on my father's work. So all of a sudden you can see, if we have a curriculum within a school where we know it's not about just teaching a child to listen, take turns and share, but instead it's about encouraging communication and interaction and flexibility and creativity and adaptability. Well, if those are our goals, that should fit into a school and therapy, shouldn't it? And this gets right into the next question. What do you think Dr. Greenspan would say about current intervention practices in child development? I know what he would say because he was saying it before he died. He was not happy.
Not happy.
And the reason he wasn't happy is because everybody gets so focused on specific skills. They don't see the child as a whole. And even individual therapists, whether you're speech therapy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, mental health, education, people don't work together, even though they pretend they co-treat. But they're not actually co-treating because they're not working on the same stuff, right? They're actually working on separate things together. Well, that's treating next to each other. I wouldn't call that co-treating. Now, if you really want to co-treat, you should be thinking, what is the big picture? What integrates speech and OT and education and mental health? Well, social emotional health does. And so if that becomes your umbrella for everything you do, learning to enunciate and speak clearly is a very specific and important skill as part of communication. But communication is the goal, right? Sensory motor activities are very important. Fine motor skills like writing, extremely important for a child to learn from an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. But what if their sensory system isn't organized enough to sit down? Well, if they're not self-regulating because they don't know how to co-regulate, what's the point of teaching them to hold a pencil if they can't sit down? And so if that becomes your umbrella for everything you do, learning to enunciate and speak clearly is a very specific and important skill as part of communication. But communication is the goal, right? Sensory motor activities are very important. Fine motor skills like writing, writing, extremely important for a child to learn from an occupational therapist or a physical therapist. But what if their sensory system isn't organized enough to sit down? Well, if they're not self-regulating because they don't know how to co-regulate, So we as a group need to look at what are we targeting? What are we really working towards? And if we look at the big picture, all the details fall into place. But if we look at each detail, sometimes we lose sight of the big picture. My father used to say, we have to see the forest and the trees. But most people get stuck in the trees and they get lost and they don't know where the forest begins and ends. And they don't feel safe and they don't know where they are.
Yeah, Jake, Lais have a question that I think could be
Yeah,
a
one
good
more.
question. Do you think a professional that work with DIR Floortime, Greenspan Floortime, can work together with ABA? This is a
I'll
tricky,
tell you.
but we know, we know.
I'm gonna tell you exactly what my father used to say in
What
regards to
your
that.
father...
Okay. We can work together as long as the person doing ABA is going to be animated and playful and respond to what the child is showing them and address their needs. Well, if you find an ABA therapist who does those things, I'll teach them how to do floor time because they're probably already doing some of it.
So
But
we have a practice here in Brazil that people put all those intervention inside one clinic.
yeah,
What do you think about it?
So basically, I think that's mainly marketing and business. I don't think that is actually the best recipe because you don't have any consistency. You have children being pulled between different models and frameworks and theories. Now, that doesn't mean principles of ABA can't be used with floor time. We integrate behavioral components. Absolutely. It's not about saying ABA is bad, but if a child is going from ABA to floor time, to school, to speech therapy, to occupational therapy, and there's no consistency across all of those interventions of how they're being delivered, the child is being pulled between many, many, many different worlds and learning experiences. It would be like you going to one classroom in your school and your teacher is very nice and warm and supportive and allows you to create. And the next classroom you go to is very strict and rigid and just tells you what to do and you have to do it without talking back. And then another classroom you go to is something else. Are you gonna really, one, are you gonna feel safe at school? Are you gonna enjoy the experience? Or is it gonna be overwhelming because you're being pulled between so many? Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
I think we have a person, Guilherme, that he wants to speak with you. Ask directly.
Yeah, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, it's a great pleasure to meet you. I have a question regarding the plans for doing whole companies training.
Yeah.
So I know that's not the case yet, but is there any plannings on bringing that to Brazil on the Greenspan Firehouse?
So yes, but what I've told Paula also, who's part of a big company, is that the key ingredient to do this well is finding the people who are most passionate and most capable to train first. So I've been approached by huge organizations with hundreds of therapists and professionals. They want me to certify, and I tell them no. Okay, I say no. I give me 5 to 10 to start with. Create a leadership team. Okay, I want 5 to 10 of your best people who are most passionate and dedicated to learning this. I will teach them, and then we can teach more people, but they're going to help. Yeah. And so then it becomes
help, please.
But then it trickles down. So we already have the most passionate, effective people learning it at the top. And now everybody else is going to see them, understand their language more clearly. And now we're creating a community around it. But if we did everybody all at once, unfortunately, what I've experienced is no one really learns it as well because you haven't created an infrastructure within the organization. But if we have an infrastructure, now we can train everybody. And ideally, what I'd love to do is have many of these organizations continue to provide training opportunities to their own staff through the materials that we provide you with.
Yeah. Okay. So an inside out job or a cascade effect, right?
Yeah, exactly. But what we've done is we've developed the content and the materials that we basically will give to Paula. Already has many of them, and she's going to start offering free discussion groups to go through certain articles that we use for training. And if there's another big organization who wants to do that, I'd be open to discussing that. Right? We'd have to make sure it's in the right people's hands, though, because that's the other challenge. There's a group I've worked with for 10 years in the U.S. who was doing this, but they actually weren't doing it the way that they told me they were going to do it. And I've only recently found out. And they weren't training people outside the organization. They were only training people inside the organization. But the truth is, I want you to train people inside your organization, but I also want you to make it available to people on the outside if it's going to be free. Right. And because it's more about spreading the word that's good for everybody than it is about just keeping it isolated or making money from it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's a good question. All right, everybody. I really do have to get running. Paula, I know you can
Jake,
answer these questions.
how you leave me this way now?
I'm leaving you with, I can already tell, a wonderful group of people. I can already tell that you all are special because I can promise you one thing. In the US, we would not have this many people on a Zoom at 8 o'clock at night. So
yeah.
I really appreciate you all being there and showing how much you care about the work you do, the kids you have, the families you work with. I mean, that to me speaks volumes about why I'm coming down there. And actually, the reason I chose to come down there, because I don't like to travel as much as I used to, but it's because Paula is the one who showed me how passionate Brazilians are about this. So you can thank her.
We have
when
good people here. We have a good people
I know
here.
you do. I know you do. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening and asking questions. And I hope I get to see all of you at the lecture in January. Okay. Thank you, Paula. We'll talk soon. Okay, everybody. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye,
Jake.
everybody.
Have a good night and thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Take care, everybody.
Gente, passou o Relâmpago Marquinhos em cima de mim aqui. Eu não consigo, não tem como. É muita informação. Quando as pessoas falam assim, ué, mas 2 dias de curso com o Jake? Gente, 5 minutos com esse homem. 5 minutos com esse homem é um volume de informação.